Welcome to the Nerd Party.
It's suddenly gotten much more neon here on Houselights, and welcome here to what is the Wing of Lecter, where we are exploring, inspired by our look at Silence of the Lambs as we started House of Demi. We suddenly realized it would be fun to go off and branch into the Wing of Lecter, and so we're following the character of Hannibal Lecter, and strangely, it's put us in a time loop that's taken us back to the 1980s somehow, not for a prequel, but for the technically first film in the series, which is weird. I guess, this is all a big loop, and I'm pleased to have two wonderful people here to help me explore this Michael Mann seminal work from the 1980s. The much more professional FBI head Tristan Riddell, and the actually much nicer head of the psychiatric ward, Dr. Sci-Fi.
He was much nicer in this movie.
He's a much nicer guy, he's
that room
very
was
professional.
Clean. I don't know when, ownership of that psych hospital. That's the nicest psych hospital I've ever seen.
Man, it was so beautiful. You could hang paintings in there.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's almost as if it was designed for a different purpose. It's weird. I don't know. I don't get it. But all of those art choices that we're going to delve into aside, welcome, of course, to Houselights. We're pleased to have everybody here. We love talking about these things. We love it if you talk about us. Go online, join Nerd Party on Twitter, the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram, and of course, thenerdparty.com/contact if you want to reach out to us for ideas of things you would like us to take a look at. And I am extremely excited because Manhunter, the film that we're looking at, is the first adaptation of Red Dragon. It came out in 1986 in the States, 87 in UK, I think a little bit later in France, like all of these sorts of things. It's got a really weird release history. And as all things Michael Mann, there are about 6,000 or 7,000 cuts floating around out there. And this work, before I get into my weird story about my lifelong relationship with this movie, I need to remind myself and the audience, Tristan, Darren, this is your first time watching Manhunter ever, correct?
Correct.
Both of you watched it specifically for this show, and I can't wait to hear what you guys thought about it. We'll postpone the whole first viewing thing because that'll just come up, organically. But I gotta ask Darren, first things first, you've seen Red Dragon, so you've seen a much more faithful adaptation of the source material. What were you expecting coming into Manhunter, and did it go off on a weird tangent, or could you still see enough of that core material where you were like, okay, I can see how this is the same thing?
Yeah, you could see that it's the same story, that the characters, the beats are all there, but it was jarring because this movie was made 16 years before Red Dragon, which we watched last week, and it was just, I was really struck by, I was more focused, less on the plot, because the plot's basically the same, but just how it was shot, just like when I'm going to say, Gil Grissom all the time. I know that's not the name of the character, but that is who that actor is to me. But when he's getting ready to go into the house for the first time, and and there's like a tight shot because I guess the camera only had a lens that did that angle, and he's getting his tape recorder out and he's getting his camera out, and it was just like, it made me, I almost want to edit it together and side by side look at it with Red Dragon, because in the Red Dragon shot, you see him not from the inside of the house coming in, but from the outside. You see him break the security seal, and it's just way more visual storytelling of what is going on. Whereas in Manhunter, it just felt like every shot, and I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's different because it really felt like this is how movies were shot, composed, the way, the angles were chosen, all these choices that go into film. Just the art of storytelling had evolved and changed so much in that 16-year jump between these movies. That was the most fascinating thing for me to watch, was comparing it to Red Dragon. Again, not for plot wise or acting wise, but just visually, like, why did they choose this shot? Why does the camera have to be so close to everybody all the time? Did we not bring some wide lenses? But overall, I think this was the most enjoyable way, was watching it, being able to compare it. I don't necessarily know if I would have enjoyed this if this was my first exposure to the story. I think it would have been a little bit more of a slog of like, okay. And because seeing where they put time, like there was barely any time spent on, we blank on the name, but the blind lady. Like I felt like she was like there, and then she's in the plot. And I felt like in Red Dragon, we had a little bit more of a warm up of her relationship, and that they're coworkers. And not that we didn't see they were coworkers in Manhunter, but it felt way more rushed or just assumed. And I feel like the way the information of the story was communicated in Red Dragon just flowed better. And again, I think a lot of that is 86 versus 02, not necessarily on quality, but just your modern cinema brain and how we like to receive the information of cinema.
Yes, I understand everything you're saying there. The one qualifier I will give to it is Michael Mann. His directing style is not super typical for the 80s. Like this is very much Michael Mann of the 80s, and he was one of those people that was a definite influence on how films were done back then. Like he created Miami Vice, which changed the way television was done and the way that music was used on television, all of those sorts of things. And he's always been a very specific kind of filmmaker. So that I don't discount what you're saying though, because he is, especially if you watch Man through time, it adapts over time with him. You still can see that it's a Michael Mann film, but to your point, it evolves with the times, right? Especially with his embrace of technologies over time, digital filmmaking, all of those sorts of things. The way that he shoots stuff can change.
It did feel like he was a man limited by his time, kind of quoting, Tony Stark or something like that. But I'd say the one scene my favorite scene is when Will Graham is figuring out that he saw them on the home video. Like just that scene. And at this point, William, Peterson is just in the role, and he's just turning it over in his head, and he's talking it out, and you just see, and the music is swelling, and you can tell like he's on a roll, like he's about to figure it out. The pieces are about to fall into place so that he can get this guy. And I thought that was really well done.
So Tristan, same sort of question to you. Do you follow with Darren here? Like what other sort of shading would you give to that? What other additional takeaways would you have had with looking at Manhunter specifically, not just as a Michael Mann film, but as an adaptation of another work?
Well, it was interesting because because one thing that we used to ask each other all the time was, where do we see this director? And I know Michael Mann, I don't know him personally, but I know I've seen a lot of Michael Mann movies, but I had never seen this one before, even though you've asked me for years to watch this movie. I just haven't. That is true. And I'm so happy that I was able to do it. And almost right away, like when we see Will Graham and Molly Graham together, husband and wife, in bed together with the ocean view, everything super blue, huge windows, they're rolling around in the sheets. I was like, that is Michael Mann right there. Like if there was ever a prototypical Michael Mann shot, it was definitely that. And before we watched it though, actually after my wife and I watched Red Dragon, I said, I was like, hey, next week we're going to do Manhunter, so it should be really cool to compare the two because they're based off of the same novel. And so we watch a trailer together, and both of us go, oh no, this is so 80s. Oh my God. we were a little taken aback at how 80s it was. I knew it was made in the 80s, but I had no idea that it was going to be like, you know, like We Love the 80s on VH1 had a baby and then made a movie, you know, like so watching it wasn't interesting. And so it was hard not, like Darren was saying, like it was hard not to contrast and compare constantly to Ed Norton and Red Dragon and everything like that. And I think the one thing that everything else was like just a completely different style, different decade. And so I kind of took it as interpretation. But one thing that made me laugh out loud so super hard was something that you and I talked about, and I liked Red Dragon more than you did, but we didn't rate it that differently. But one thing we absolutely could agree on was that Ed Norton did not rough up Philip Seymour Hoffman enough. The reporter.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of threw him up against a car. Yeah. Thank you. He kind of threw him up against a car, but it's like half-hearted and weird. And then I was like, oh, okay. Oh, here comes that scene in Manhunter. I bet this is better, you know, because like John likes this more. And then he just like lifts him up, spins him around in the air, throws him on a car, and then shatters the windshield. And I was just like, I literally said, oh my God, like when that happened. I was like, there's gotta be a happy medium, folks.
but see here, the first point I'll go at is that what I love about that is what I love, I think, about Manhunter in general is Mann doesn't think small. Mann thinks huge theatrics. And that moment in specific actually winds up communicating so much about how traumatized Graham is simply seeing Lowndes, that he hates him. He literally hates him with every fiber of his being. He wants him dead because this guy is a piece of garbage, human detritus that traumatized him and his family while he was recovering from a near-death experience. And that, I think, is super immediately relatable to people in the audience, that if this guy Lowndes had done this to me, I would want to react this way too. I would want to do this to him. So there's a very, I think, relatable emotional aspect to that. In terms of how, you know, quote unquote 80s it is, I mean, it was the style at the time, you know, like there's only so much
we don't hold
you
that
can
against
do to
it.
escape
It's just
that.
what it is.
But what I truly enjoy about Manhunter, and this was something I backed into because when I saw this for the first time, it took me many years to come back to it and suddenly realize this movie helped shape my tastes in terms of what I like to see. I was a very young lad, and I had gone on a trip with my classmates to Hilton Head, South Carolina, because my buddy's family had a week down there, and so they said, "Hey, why don't you bring all your friends from school?" And it was a small school, all of that stuff, and so we all went down. We were the tight band of friends, and we went down there, and we wound up watching Manhunter. And I think I was just going on 13, or 13 going on 14 that summer. And I watched it, and I remember everybody watching it, but that ending always stuck with me with In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. And it was one of those things where when I later went back to Manhunter as an adult, I hadn't watched it since then. And I was like, oh, wait, people talked about this movie Manhunter. I think I saw this when I was younger. And that thing kicks on. And I go, I can remember where I was sitting. I remember who was sitting to the left of me. I remember everybody else's reactions. And I remember sitting there and having that initial reaction as a wee lad, seeing things going on and saying, I like this. I like the way this works. This is interesting to me. And that's sort of always stuck with me. So there is definitely a nostalgia that comes with this movie overall. But of course, for this, we wound up watching the director's cut, or supposed director's cut, I guess you could say. There are, based on the research, which a lovely assistant actually sent a great link to me earlier today. So hats off to you, Tristan, which had like a scene by scene comparison. And so we watched the director's cut. So your first experience with this is the director's cut. And I'm colored by years of no director's cut. So I have a very different sort of, I can still watch this and go, director's cut, that wasn't in the original. There's a missing shot there, those sorts of things.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you about that, if you don't mind me interjecting, because
no, please.
One thing that you told me about with the director's cut versus the theatrical cut is that so much of the original footage of the director's cut was lost, and so they had to use like a transfer that Mann had on VHS or something like that? Or?
It wasn't VHS. The story, as I remember it, is Mann wanted to release this director's cut. And of course, they were like, hey, we can make money. Yes, we'd love to release your director's cut. But the negative's been lost. So the only version of the director's cut out there is a print that Mann has. And so that's why when you watch the director's cut, you see those radical drops in quality. And then when it flips back, you're like, oh, it's like you put on glasses and you're like, oh, I can see everything now.
When I started watching this, I was like, oh my gosh, I realized I had my streaming set at 720 and I was like, I got to bump that up because I can barely tell what I'm looking at. It was really grainy. And I'm sure that was probably a different shot at the beginning.
And so I want to ask you, John.
Yeah.
As I was watching this, because like most of the time director's cuts just kind of add footage or extend scenes and everything like that. And so while I was watching this, I was kind of like, oh, well, once it gets to crappy quality, that's director's cut. And when it's not crappy quality, then that's theatrical cut. But then when I looked it up, the theatrical cut is longer than the director's cut. And so is it not just it's not just a simple addition. So can you talk about the differences between the two?
Absolutely. What it is, and fortunately there's a very recent comparison, is Stallone's new cut of Rocky IV, where that cut is, I think, actually technically like a minute shorter than the theatrical version. And a similar sort of thing happens here where Mann decided to tighten some shots, drop some shots, tighten some scenes. Notably, there's a moment of Graham riding his elevator up to his hotel that's cut. There's actually less blood and less violence at the end. Graham shoots him fewer times in the director's cut. When he's on the airplane and he falls asleep and the little girl sees the photographs, that's on screen less time, so that's tightened up. There's actually some reordering of lines here and there. And it's interesting because I think we are all so used to the idea of a director's cut being, well, they forced me to cut 25 minutes out, and so I've restored all of it. Kingdom of Heaven being a great example of, no, this is the movie I cut together, and then those butchers went after it. Whereas this seems to be simply an alternate cut that Mann had, I guess, in his head. I would maintain that most likely Mann fiddled with it a little bit more when it was released and said, oh, so long as I'm going back, I might as well take the opportunity to tweak a couple of things I'm not in love with anymore. Sort of the same thing again that Stallone did. And I mean, before I give my reaction to that sort of thing, I've got to know, do you feel that it was worth the director's cut with that drop in quality? Does it take you out of the movie because your eye and your brain are immediately thinking, oh, this is different, right? It interrupts the flow visually, I would say, to have that drop in quality happen in those scenes. So does that affect the viewing experience your first time in at it?
I think first time, I want to say kind of. Like, I don't want to give a definitive yes or no, because if I saw the theatrical version first and then watched the director's cut to see what was different, I wouldn't have minded the drop in quality, because it's kind of like in Studio 54, like with that director's cut. Like it was the same kind of story. Like they lost the negatives, and so it just you have this huge drop in quality when you see different scenes. And so I definitely wanted to see what the director wanted to do, or initially wanted to do. It wasn't so much like, oh, this is horrible quality and it's taking me out of it. Oh, this is annoying. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, oh, this is different. Like, this is what the director wanted to do. And so I kept thinking about that, where I'm just like, oh, I wonder why the production company wanted to take this out. Or like, I wonder why this was different. It just kind of made me think more about the behind the scenes than the actual impact of the film itself. So it wasn't that it was the quality that was the issue. It was like if there was like a little number that popped up in the bottom of the screen that said like,
right. I think that's a great way to put it.
Signed MM.
Yeah. What about you, Darren? Did it affect your viewing at all?
No, it was, I think, just overall like high quality film or just the way it was shot, like for Red Dragon. I just kind of lumped everything into that same, and I'm streaming it and all this. So there's already so much compression on everything that I didn't notice. It wasn't enough of a difference to be like, oh, why is this shot completely different? Like, if I think about it and kind of went back in my mind, like, oh yeah, well, the shots, like the beautiful shots when he's in the $1 million mental institution and running down the stairs, like obviously this is, theatrical because it's clean and crisp and really nice, but a lot of it's also just dark. There's a lot of nighttime stuff. There's a lot of dark stuff where it's not lit, again, it's lit like the 80s lit it, which is not that bright, and you kind of have to fill in the blanks with your imagination sometimes. But no, it wasn't a distraction because I didn't really know what I was looking for. I was just more making sure I was watching the right edition, so I wasn't talking about the wrong thing.
Yeah. Fair enough. As somebody who has had so much history with it, it's really weird because the director's cut is sort of a push for me. There are things that I really am glad get added back in because I'm like, okay, that's better to have a little bit more here or a little bit more of that or an extra beat even, or maybe even tighten something up. But I don't see the director's cut as again, to go back to this same point, we're so used to a director's cut being a substantially different type of experience, or at least I am, where I come into it and let's go back to The Abyss, where that ending in the special edition,
The Abyss is a whole nother thing though. It's like the whole third act change. I think more of like Aliens, because Aliens had moments that were re-injected back into the story. I mean, not that you can't use The Abyss as an example, but I feel like that is such a, and then we added back the third act, it's a whole different take.
No, I think that's fair. I think Aliens is a better example. I do, because there are people who love the special edition of Aliens and there are people who don't like it because it takes too long to get where they want to go, sort of thing, and they like it a little bit tighter in the beginning and sort of stuff. Philistines, we call them, and we. So I like that. That's the difficult thing, though. But of course, what puts us in the wing of Lecter is Lecter.
That's true.
Here in the credits, spelled Lecktor.
I was gonna say, where's the K come from?
But that bothered the crap out of me, and there's no reason for it. He's not a real person, but for some reason, I was just like, "There's not how you spell it."
The funny thing is, on the soundtrack, Lecter's name appears on it, and the K is gone, and it's Lecktor. So it's spelled differently depending on where you look, but we have Brian Cox originating the role of Hannibal Lecter. And we all know that supposedly initially he was offered the chance to come back in Silence of the Lambs. So Darren, I'll kick this to you first. Here you have a somewhat different Hannibal Lecter.
Very different.
So what's your takeaway? Like you've been soaking in Anthony Hopkins for 3 weeks now.
That's true.
And now you have this cop procedural Hannibal Lecter.
It's like all of a sudden you watch Zachary Quinto and as Spock, but for 90% of your life, Leonard Nimoy has been Spock. How do you compare that? And yeah,
if Zachary Quinto was only in Star Trek 09 for like 3 minutes.
Right.
Very true.
That's true.
Yes.
And that's what I was going to say is this, we talked about in some of the other movies how, is this a Lecter movie or not? Because that's obviously because, he's become the title character, even though he's not the title character in any of these, really. In Silence of the Lambs, it's,
quite literally with the TV release of this movie, because they renamed the TV release Red Dragon: The Curse of Hannibal Lecter. And the reason why they did that is because Silence of the Lambs did so well.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, we all know those movies where the villain steals the show and all of a sudden everybody wants to see more of that villain. So I will just say with this performance, I mean, one, it's hard to not think of Anthony Hopkins, but this didn't feel like the role that launched the character. It really doesn't. This role doesn't make me feel like, well, I got to see more Hannibal. The point I was actually making is this felt more like, no, this is Manhunter. This is Will Graham's story.
Yeah.
Versus when we talked about a lot of the other movies, or especially Red Dragon, we were like, where does it become a Hannibal-led story versus a actual main character-led story? And there was no ambiguity in this movie. Like, Hannibal is he's a background character. He is not, I mean, he's part of the plot, but it is definitely first and foremost FBI agent Will Graham's story.
And that is one of the things that I love about Manhunter is there is absolutely no protagonist confusion or antagonist confusion here. This is Will Graham's movie. This movie is about him and about him looking for, and Hannibal is exactly that. He's just a tool he is using, but it's a tool that gives us insight into Graham. And, before I offer anything else, Tristan, one of the things we talked about in Red Dragon was Ratner wanted some more showy stuff from Norton, showing his nervousness. And then instead we get sweaty armpits when he goes out. Whereas in this,
we get the sprint.
Well, we have him virtually having a meltdown, trying to get out of the cell, like banging on the door, let me out. And then the run. Do you feel that was over the top? Do you feel it was suited for this type of movie? Or do you think it was more effective in Red Dragon?
Well, it's interesting because I did think about this because you and I had that conversation, and I feel like Ed Norton's reaction probably would have worked better in Manhunter, but the reaction that William Peterson gave us in Manhunter, I think would have worked well in Red Dragon. Because in Red Dragon, the opening scene is what gave him his traumatic experience. What gave him the PTSD, and the reason why he wakes up with nightmares and everything like that. Why he has that scar? He was attacked by Lecter. We see that happen as an audience in Red Dragon. So it gives Graham the license to have his freak out. In Manhunter, we don't get that. We don't get that until way later in the movie. And even then, it's just a conversation that he has with his kid in the cereal aisle of a grocery store. And so to me, it felt way over the top, even though I knew what actually happened because I watched Red Dragon. It felt almost flip-flopped. But at the same time, I feel like if they chose a different location where he just kind of busted out of the cell, then busted out of the main doors, and then had a breather, it would have been fine. It would have been great. But that whole ridiculous Will Smith in Men in Black, like running through the inclined levels, it's laughable. It's laughable. And it really upset me because I feel like Peterson gave a great performance in that moment with Lecter. Like you could tell he was crawling under his skin, like you could tell that he was uncomfortable and that he just needed to get out of that room. And then when he got out of the museum, the psychiatric hospital, he, like he went to the edge and just had to breathe. And then like we see we see his POV with the grass where it's all weird and pseudo pixelated and out of focus. And you're like, what am I looking at? And then when he takes a breath, you see a little bit wider shot and you're like, oh, he's looking at the grass. He's calming down. His eyes are coming into focus. I thought that was great, but it just was a stupid ass decision to have him run during that screw of a building. That it just, yeah. So that's my opinion on that.
I don't have the negative opinion of that. I get what you're saying. I do. I like it because of its over the top nature, because it's that whole thing of like, this is the beginning of Graham's descent into panic and loss of control, because he's been very controlled up until this moment. You've always had the feeling of Graham being in control, and Peterson does a great job of being in control, except when he's on the phone with Molly and he gets short with her. And then they, hey, yeah. I'm sorry sort of thing. So like, I think that visually it works. I think it works specifically because this is just the type of film that it is. Everything's very big. And so I'm willing to roll with it, but I completely understand what you're saying. And something that actually just comes up for me that I've been meaning to mention the whole time is, we all know this is an adaptation of Red Dragon, but it's called Manhunter. And then Tristan, you mentioned the TV cut Red Dragon : the Hannibal, whatever the hell it was called, right?
The Curse of Hannibal Lecter.
Curse of Hannibal Lecter. God, it sounds like Halloween 6.
I was just about to say, I was like, it's a Halloween.
Yeah. So, do you guys know why it's called Manhunter and not Red Dragon?
I do, but I want you to say it.
But because I read Wikipedia, so
okay, never mind. But... No, Tristan, I cede the floor to you. Tell the audience why.
It's because, is it Enter the Dragon?
Year of the Dragon.
Year of the Dragon
had been released the year before. Yep.
Year of the Dragon was released a year before, and it was a huge financial flop. And Dino De Laurentiis was less like, I don't want to be associated with that dragon movie. So let's call it Manhunter.
He was also afraid that it would be thought that this was a sequel to Year of the Dragon.
Or like a Bruce Lee dragon movie.
That is one of the reasons cited, was they were afraid, just like they were afraid that Revenge of the Jedi and Vengeance of Khan were too close. We all know that story with Star Trek 2, that it was the Vengeance of Khan and Revenge of the Jedi, and somebody sitting on the board was like, those words are very similar. We need to change the word vengeance, right? Movie decisions can be dumb, but what do you think of the title? Does the title Manhunter work? Is it an effective title, or is it something where you sit there and you think there had to be a better title for this movie? And
I think it would make a great title. It's a great title for a drag film, I think. Instead of Tu Wong Fu, I think Manhunter would have worked great.
Completely agree. I think the neon green title font still, once it starts up, you're sitting there, you're going, am I sure this was supposed to be not in the beaded room part of the video
right,
store?
I was going to say, is this the XXX spoof of Red Dragon? Or what is this?
Yeah, exactly. But think of it. You're making a movie called Red Dragon. You're making your movie. You're Michael Mann. I'm making Red Dragon. I'm adapting Red Dragon. And you get the call from higher up. It's going to be called something else. That brainstorming session had to be really interesting, right?
It works because it's what the movie is. Like, I would say it fits because, this is about an FBI agent who's a manhunter, and he gets his man. It's like U.S. Marshals. What's this movie about? It's about U.S. Marshals. So we're going to call it that. So it's not factually wrong, but it's not necessarily the most intriguing title ever.
Darren, do you watch Rick and Morty?
Yes.
Okay, because that was very Justin Roiland delivery, where it's just like, this is a manhunter where he hunts his man, and he always gets his man when he's on the hunt.
Yes.
I don't know exactly if I was adapting a book called Red Dragon and all of a sudden an executive came in and said, "You can't call it that." I don't know what I would have called it, because I just, and that's the thing. I also have to
You definitely
remind
don't want to call it
myself.
the Tooth Fairy.
Well, and this is also pre Hannibal
That's
Lecter
true.
being a thing. So I have to remember, like, there's not going to be anything Hannibal related, because he's not the breakout villain yet.
Right.
In this case.
And, based on conversations with my brother, who I mentioned previously, we had seen Silence of the Lambs and we read these books and everything. My brother, fancied going into criminology originally, stuff like that. His take has always been that this Lecter is a much more realistic Lecter. Now, Darren,
He's
I don't
a villain,
know if
not a super villain.
But he also has, when we were talking during Red Dragon, I think this also colored a little bit of my perception of where I wanted Anthony Hopkins to be in Red Dragon, because he has very much that caged, like, mountain lion look about him when Graham is in there. He is locked onto him like a big cat, just thinking, if I could just find a way to squeeze through these bars, I'm going to eat you. I'm going to completely destroy you.
I love Brian Cox, but Anthony Hopkins' performance, because he's taking it in that direction of that intellect, like, I feel the intellect of Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal. I do not necessarily feel that. I never felt like tension or fear when he's sitting there with Brian Cox. All the words are there. He's saying the same words that Anthony Hopkins says, but it's a very different take on the character. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's just not. And I'll also say I really enjoyed how, like you said, Tristan, how Red Dragon shows you. I love how it opens. I love opening. Now, again, I totally understand that makes way more sense in a 2002 movie that is 3 movies deep into this character being played by him, because there's that tension and that fear, because he's in the room with Hannibal, and we all know what that means, and the peril he's in. You couldn't start this movie with that, but it is a good example of show versus tell. That shows where his trauma is coming from. It's a traumatic moment, but in this one, it's barely a line that is described, and it.
I'm with you, Darren, where I didn't feel any of the intellectual prowess from Brian Cox's performance, and maybe I wouldn't be looking for that if I hadn't been, seen 3 Anthony Hopkins Hannibal Lecter movies. But at the same time, they tried to portray this cat and mouse thing where it's just like, you caught me, and it's like, well, you had disadvantages. Well, what disadvantages? Well, you're insane. I love that line, but I don't feel like it was earned, because we have no reference point for this character. Like, they didn't show us the intro. They didn't really give us that much backstory, but behind him behind Graham and Lecter. And so I felt no real animosity between the two of them, because I had no backstory and no reference point. And so, to me, like, I read online that Michael Mann wanted him to be a British schoolboy, perform the character like a British schoolboy. I kind of got that, and then and because I got that, I was not intimidated in the least.
Well, and it's like we said, there's no protagonist confusion in this movie. It is clearly, Will Graham's story, and Brian Cox plays Hannibal Lecter as a villain, as a bad person. But Anthony Hopkins elevated that role, like won an Oscar for it. So, and again,
sure,
we're not saying this to bash on Brian Cox and 1986, but it's very hard to compare.
And that's the thing, right? Is I know that Anthony Hopkins, and completely agree, Hopkins transforms the role, and Silence of the Lambs is it is what it is. I mean, it's a fantastic film, and Hopkins is who Lecter needs to be in that film. He, like, Brian Cox's Lecter doesn't fit there. It wouldn't have worked at all. And what I find interesting, though, is that I do see a little bit more quote unquote realism, I guess you could say, because this is the defeated villain. He's still very angry, but he doesn't have his tools. His backstory has also changed a bit, but is that Graham?
That's true. They don't even say anything about him eating anybody at all.
But is that Graham, softening the story for his son so that his son knows that he's a bad guy and he did bad things, but there's no need to really tell him everything. Just he's relaying the story in the way that his son does, but that's a lot of headcanon. I don't think it's there at all. I think that that's just the way the script was written. But this is very much a police procedural type of film where you can see how this is the cop story and the cop tracking down. And when you have that cop story, you have the sleazebag reporter and the professional supervisor and the villain in the jail cell. Like, it's very much in that mold. And that,
he
again,
doesn't break out of that mold.
Right. But that, again, is something that I do enjoy about Mann's adaptation, is in a very large way. And I'm not saying that this is like watching Psycho or Rear Window or anything like that, but no matter what the source material was for Hitchcock, you knew you were watching a Hitchcock film. And so sort of the artistry that I give credit to this film for is this is a Michael Mann film. It's based on the same source material, but he said, I'm making my movie. This is simply an inspiration point, and I will lift stuff out of it. Like Jurassic Park, even, where
the
Jurassic
book is
Park
very different.
Hardly resemble. They're dinosaurs and some characters with the same names, but Hammond's a nice guy in the movie, for Pete's sake. And Ian Malcolm lives, but you go to Red Dragon, and this might be a little bit unfair, but because the origin of this is looking at the work of directors. I don't see anything about that where you could say, oh, who directed this film? And I would look at that. I could rattle off names. There's nothing really that's telling me somebody did anything besides really manage it well. Whereas with this, I sit down and Tristan, like you said, I see a shot and I go, oh, that's a Michael Mann movie. Absolutely. And so that's where I think the art of this film exists. And that's why I still have a great affinity for it, for any of its shortcomings, is this is Michael Mann making a movie, period. And that I can respect, that I like. I like the auteur stepping in and saying, this is how I make movies. Okay, cool. Regardless of whether I like or dislike it, I know you did this. I give points for that.
I think that's harder for me because I haven't seen as many of Michael Mann's work. So I don't have that imprint of what a Michael Mann movie is. Like, I'm thinking in the opening shots where I'm like, why are we on the beach? I cannot hear what they're saying at all. We're having this establishing a character conversation, and we picked like a noisy overpass. I mean, not noisy, but the beach. And it was very hard to make them out.
That was a very, very odd choice to begin the film on the beach with no preface, no nothing. And I found the cinematography interesting because maybe interesting isn't the right word. Like, I understood what Mann was going for, where you have Crawford, played by the fantastic Dennis Farina. I love Dennis Farina so much. And
I find him to be that synthesis I'm looking for of the Crawford character. This is where
he was a good Crawford.
Keitel's a swing and a miss because he doesn't achieve that Farina level of, I believe this guy runs a division. I believe this guy is a no BS. He walks into a room and he's like, what are you doing? You're doing something different now. Get out there and do it. And the guy's like, yes, sir. I'm on my way.
And Farina is eternally from Chicago. It's just like,
yes.
Like, no matter where the movie is set, you're just like, oh, this guy's from Chicago. He must have moved here recently.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
But in the scene when they're on the log, you have that shot where the camera is almost like right smack up against Farina's back.
It's really close.
It's like you swear the lens is going to touch the fabric. But at the same time, from a storytelling standpoint, from a compositional standpoint, it's Mann telling us that Crawford is boxing Graham in. That he's trying to manipulate Graham into doing what he needs him to do by showing him the pictures. These are families. Help me save some more families. I don't have a lot of time. And I get that, but he repeats that further and further on, even when Graham is gaining more and more control over the situation. And then it culminates later on when Graham is looking out the window and saying, pull the sticker back.
Right. He's not even looking at him. He knows he's
not even
right
looking
so
at him.
hard. He doesn't almost even need confirmation at that point.
Exactly. He's got it. He's there. And so from a storytelling from a storytelling standpoint, it works really well. But when it's the first thing you see, almost the first thing you see, it's just really obtrusive, and you don't get that language right away. You just feel awkward, and you're not supposed to feel awkward. You're supposed to feel the character being boxed in. So I have this hate-love relationship with the cinematography, because you feel like you understand what he's going for, but at the same time, he doesn't really hit it home right away.
It's interesting. There was another vibe I kind of got throughout this movie with the beaches and so Graham's interaction with his wife Molly. I don't know why, but it made me think a lot about Jaws and the relationship between Chief Brody and his wife, where it's almost like their scenes are unscripted and they're kind of just flowing off each other. I don't know. I don't know if that's really a connection, but it was just interesting to see, because I felt like it's like they're obviously trying to establish more about Graham's character through his wife, but I don't know. It wasn't really there for me.
See, I actually like her in this film. I think she's given much more to do. That, we were talking about that with Red Dragon.
That is true. And
true. It's like she feels much more integral to Graham as a character, and she keeps coming back in the movie, and they find ways to bring her in so that Graham can get regrounded, and we can see his progression as relates to her. Because
she's in the movie more, and we don't even have the twist ending where he goes to the house, right? in this version.
Well, again, very direct, sort of linear ending, sort of thing. Not pulling that, but. Speaking of the house, this is our second pass at Dollarhide. Can't ignore Dollarhide. And the great Tom Noonan plays him. And I want to know.
I love seeing Tom Noonan in this, where he's a child killer. It reminds me of that time when he was in the X-Files as a child killer. And then when we saw him just on this show in Last Action Hero as a child killer. I think this guy has range.
He does. He does have range. But it's interesting. It's a very different physical presence. And what's fascinating is there's yet more footage that will likely never see the light of day. I've seen some stills of it, but they did shoot a version of this where you saw the tattoo on his back. Now, it's a very Michael Mann type of tattoo that's on there. It's not the literal becoming into a dragon sort of thing. It's very stylized. But just to ask the question, is Noonan an effective villain in this? Is Dollarhide sympathetic, or is he given short shrift?
I think Dollarhide in this portrayal, I joked earlier, but I really do like Tom Noonan. I think he's a wonderful presence. I think he's a great actor, and he does a lot with a little. But I feel like Dollarhide, the only thing that made him formidable was his size. There was nothing about him that made us tremble. There was nothing about him that made us feel like there was any kind of threat other than his awkwardness. He felt like the awkward coworker, not the guy who could potentially cut you open. You talked about that moment with Ralph Fiennes in Red Dragon when he takes the paper from the newsie. And
what are you gonna do?
And then he just turns. He's like, "What? What are you gonna do?" As he's holding the knife, but he's not even holding it at him, and he doesn't even change his face. But he's absolutely intimidating. I'm not intimidated by Tom Noonan, and it's not until he absolutely loses it, where he imagines Reba with that dude, and he goes and he kills the guy, and then kidnaps Reba, that you realize that things are crazy. I mean, granted, like I'm totally excising with that comment. I'm totally excising the Lowndes situation.
Mhm.
But it just, again, if I saw this first, like part of me wishes I saw Manhunter first, because
Wait, are you saying you wish you had listened to John when he asked you to watch this probably 9 years ago?
It
no,
was
because I saw
too
Red
late by
Dragon
then.
well before. Yeah, I saw
Okay,
Red
well,
Dragon
that's
well
true.
Too late
before
by then.
I knew John. But it just, the atmosphere was wrong. The tone was wrong. I have no idea why he had gray eyebrows and gray hair. And like as Darren touched on, they beyond rushed the Reba conversation, like the Reba
Sure.
relationship.
Yeah.
Like almost to the point where I got
showed up like
whiplash.
halfway through the movie. I think
And-
it was like
but-
literally an hour in.
But again, he like Mann is obviously, this is the creator of Miami Vice. He's much more interested in this police procedural sort of thing that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you also have this sort of sped up thing. I think that is a true artifact of the 1980s, because watching films of the 1980s, you're very much used to, okay, they met each other in scene A and now we're in scene. Yep. Okay. Here comes the sex scene. Right. Like it
Yeah.
was
But
always
even
very
beyond
accelerated
that-
in the 80s.
Beyond that, though, like he first meets her and says like, "Oh, I have a surprise for you,"
Right.
and then takes her to the tiger.
That was out of nowhere. I mean, I
Yes.
only knew the context because of Red Dragon, that's not a good answer. That should be the reason I know the context.
Exactly.
Right.
And like that whole thing was an absolute fumble. I feel like he fumbled the bad guy and he fumbled the relationship. There was no sympathy, no nothing. Because in Red Dragon, you got a little bit more into his psyche. You understood, like you got a little bit more of the grandmother backstory. You got his hesitation with killing, with trying to kill Reba, and you realized that he had a voice talking to him. You understood more about the becoming of Red Dragon. And with this one, you had no context whatsoever. It felt like a random insert and a misuse of Noonan, because this could have been done by anybody.
Now, speaking of being done by anybody, we have another Freddie Lowndes here. And I have to say that even though I've seen this movie many times, I'm a fan of it, all of that type of stuff, it was a very long time before I realized that Freddie Lowndes was played by the same guy who played Ike Clanton in Tombstone. And the moment that I realized that, I went, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
Zero
blew my
clue
mind.
that was Stephen Lang. Zero clue that was Stephen Lang
He
when I
is
watched
a
it.
chameleon.
Oh my
he is one of
gosh.
the best character actors.
I did not
Out
even
there.
realize until this moment that was
Right?
Stephen Lang.
It's
Like
absolutely
when I
mind blowing.
when I looked it up, because I was just watching him, I didn't even wonder who it was. I just thought it was some random guy. And then when I was on IMDb, just looking certain people up, I see Stephen Lang. I was like, Stephen Lang wasn't in this movie. And then I see
Yep.
Freddie Lowndes, and I was like, oh my God. And I just kept thinking about Avatar, like Pandora.
I
it's
know,
just-
right? So it's like there's like pre-gray hair Stephen Lang and post-gray hair Stephen Lang, and they're completely different people.
He will just always be Ike Clanton to me, no matter what movie that he's in.
And
You know.
Michael Mann uses him again in Public Enemies with Johnny Depp.
Yes. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And that's just because everybody should look for any reason to use Stephen Lang in a movie. And speaking of great actors who appear in smallish roles, of course, Frankie Faison is in this, but this time
course.
as a police officer before he gets recast in Silence of the Lambs. And, it's always great to see him, because even in that small role, like I see Frankie Faison, I'm like, oh, good, I like him. But I got to ask, because, we love to say rounding thirds. So before we get to our own personal ratings, I've got to ask, this is a movie that was a complete disaster on its release, absolutely languished, forgotten, and then suddenly at one point became beloved and a cult film. And its aggregate ratings were elevated by everybody who found it in the late 90s, early 2000s. We have Slate Magazine and Salon.com heaping praise all over it. We've got a 78 out of 100 on Metacritic, a 93% aggregate positive on Rotten Tomatoes. Even though when it first came out, it was viewed as too stylish, There was a lot of criticism about the emphasis on music and visuals. The New York Times cited a quote taste for overkill. Branding, I'll lift straight from Wikipedia here. Branding Mann's stylized approach as hokey and little more than gimmicks. Now, obviously, the New York Times did not care for it. I believe the Chicago Tribune said that it was style over substance, all of those sorts of things. Yet, it's found this, if you will, hipster re-embrace over time. The question becomes, and I'll put it to you first, Tristan, is it simply caught up in an inevitable cycle of reassessment decades later? Or is this a movie that deserved this praise when it first came out? However, maybe a little bit tempered. But is this something where it was just released at the wrong time?
I think this is a situation of, this came out in 86.
Correct.
And I did as well. And so I think this is a situation of, you mentioned a hipster revitalism or something like that.
Yes.
There's, I was born in the 80s, but I wasn't raised in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I feel like when something becomes a cult classic, it usually happens, when another generation takes what's the word I'm looking for? A shine to
a swing at it.
Yeah, like a shine to another era. And I feel like that's the situation. Like I joked about how me and my wife, was going, oh no, this is so 80s. This is crazy 80s. I think this is the hipster who like wears a Spam t-shirt to the Spam factory, but he does it to take photos, not to actually enjoy it. Part of me thinks that the love for Manhunter from people from my generation or even a little bit younger are because they're like, this is a movie that's so 80s. It's fascinating to watch because it's a relic of its time. Now, I'm not trying to say they're like it ironically, like, oh my God, it's so bad, it's good. I'm not saying that at all. I think because it's so representative of the 80s that this movie cannot exist in any other time. This movie cannot exist in the 90s, not the aughts, not today. This can solely exist in 1986. That's the only time. And so people admire it for that because it's so stylized. It's so Miami Vice. It's so done by the guy who did Miami Vice. You can see it. You can feel it. You can hear it. So that's where I think that comes from, because when I looked online, I was like, what's going on here? Like, do people like? I know John loves it, but does everybody like it? Is it a good movie? Is it not? And then I look on Letterboxd, all 5 stars from the people in the building there. I go on IMDb, all 10s. I'm like, wow, okay, this must be a really great movie. And then I go to Wikipedia, it's like $15 million budget, $8 million revenue. I'm like, holy crap.
Yep. Absolute box office disaster. Caught on fire, went down in flames. De Laurentiis gets another swing and a miss in their Ove, along with the unfairly overlooked 1986 classic Transformers the movie, also released by De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. So they just didn't do a whole lot of money on those 2 features right there, but 2 features that changed entertainment forever. So, Darren, you agree with Tristan? This is just something where it's so representative of the time, or do you see something here where you could see where somebody could come at it and give it a 5 out of 5 and find this to be a classic?
No, I think I agree with Tristan. I think you have to look at it through that lens. It's weird because, that's why we look at budget / box office, because that's an actual snapshot of the time. You can look on Rotten Tomatoes, but Rotten Tomatoes is like 80 people from 2010 ranking something. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Not that they can't rank things, but it's like people vote with their money. This wasn't the smash summer hit that nobody just heard about. And then everybody started telling everybody else, oh, you got to go see Manhunter. Oh, you got to go see it. Like, this isn't Silence of the Lambs at all. You know,
now I will say undoubtedly its box office was impacted by the fact it came out the same summer as Top Gun. So, you know, I mean, how are you going to compete with Top Gun, really? You know,
which is true. And obviously there is that, but you know, good movies will rise to the top in their time.
Sure.
Or the really, really good ones. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that brings us to our ratings, our own ratings. And obviously you guys are not going to give it a 5. I think that much has been tipped. But like I said, I'm legitimately fascinated. I want to know what you guys thought. And Darren, I'm going to throw it to you first. How many driftwood
flights
beach
of
logs
stairs are we running down?
Out of 5, how many driftwood beach logs are you going to give?
Too many. No.
There you go.
Gosh, so this one's hard for me because again, I don't like doing half numbers. I'm going to give it a 1.
Wow.
It's
a
just
1.
I don't really see myself watching it again. Red Dragon is way better of a movie. I mean, I want to find a fancy way of saying it, but Red Dragon is a way better telling of this story. It almost feels like, hey, college students, you know, did you see Red Dragon? You know, we should make that. Here's some 16 millimeter cameras. Let's go shoot at night and make our own version of that exact story beat for beat. And again, I'm not saying anything against Michael Mann. I'm obviously as a talented director, but, and again, I think I said that from the very beginning, that 80s versus aughts difference of how stories are told and how you're shown, or just like there was times, did you see this, Tristan, where like the shot would just stay on something? And
that's
like,
what I was going to say.
Did you forget to turn off the camera? Cause I'm like, it was like 5 seconds past when it should have cut. And I'm
5 seconds too long, where like I was actually going to save this for when I was going to give my rating, because here's the thing is that Dov Honig, the editor, like I actually don't, they've done some amazing work. I mean, like I was going to say, I was like, Michael Mann has made some of the greatest movies ever made.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to Heat. I really am.
Yeah. Like he made Heat. He made Last of the Mohicans, and Dov Honig edited those. So this person knows what they're doing. But John, you want to interject?
Well, I just wanted to throw in Dov Honig. It is a he, according to Wikipedia, because he actually won Best Film Editing for The Fugitive in 1993. So when you say Dov Honig knows what he's doing,
yes,
well, yeah,
does.
there you go. Dov Honig knows what he's doing.
He does.
So this is what's so crazy to me is because like when I was watching it, both my wife and I were watching, and we're waiting. I have enough time to look, process, wait, and go and snap my fingers and say like, okay, cut.
Yeah.
And my wife is like, yeah, like I didn't even say cut. I just snapped my fingers, and she's like, yeah, what's this editor doing? And this happens all throughout the piece.
It happened a lot. You felt it. It was like, what? Whoa, did you something? It was way too long. But so yeah, overall, again, just it's probably, I was trying to decide between a 2 and a 1. You know, I gave Red Dragon a 3. But I'm saying the goodness of Red Dragon shown even more in watching this, and I think that kind of dragged it down a little for me.
Just so the audience has reference here, Darren, the only other ones that you've handed out here on Houselights went to Ed Wood, The Burbs, and 1492 Conquest of Paradise.
Well, we all gave ones to 1492 Conquest of Paradise.
That's true. So that one's a push. But and you and I both gave a 1 to The Burbs, which Tristan loved. So Tristan, all right, how many slideshows are you going to give Manhunter out of 5?
Well, I mean, I came into this thinking I was going to give it a 2.5, a generous 2.5. But then after talking with Darren and realizing that
I'm such a good influence.
going slide by slide, saying, "Do you see? Do you see?" I'm gonna have to give it a 2. Like, this dropped down on my scale from mediocre to bad because, like, as I was falling asleep to this movie, because I was having a hard time holding my interest, and then once we got to that scene where Graham shows up to the people that he saved, it just felt so out of place.
Now,
it felt awkward.
that's a director's cut moment that didn't belong.
What I was looking at, I'm like, wait, who are these people? Why is he here? What's going on?
I legitimately would invite you both to watch even just the ending of the theatrical, because that scene is not there. And it's actually a much more, I mean, it stays with his obsession with tableau, because afterward, in the original ending, you see a sunrise and Graham in silhouette standing on the same dock where you saw Dollarhide go out to Reba. And then you see Jack Crawford, Dennis Farina come out and just sit down there. And it's just a tableau.
And they're just happy that it's over.
And then it jumps over to his son on the beach and they're surveying the turtles. I think it's actually a better ending. It has a better flow to it than the director's cut, which again, I think that scene is neat to have him go and say, "I just had to see you," because it goes that thing where it's like he needed to see that he made a difference sort of thing. But it is forced because it very much is just sandwiched in there. And I think it just works better to have that tableau that gives you your denouement, as the fancy kids say, and then go into that little scene at the end with the family on the beach.
All right, so John, yeah. I'm aching to know how many rolled up sleeves of sports jackets do you give this film?
Can there be enough? I can honestly tell you, and the thing
has to be an even number, 2 arms.
Well, this is what's going to absolutely blow your mind. Is I love this movie, and when I say love, I cannot overstate the love that I have for this. I'm dead serious when I say that young punk kid sitting there with his friends watching this movie. This really drove home for me the type of visual styles that I like. This drove home for me the type of epic nature I like to certain things. It drove home to me when I like music and how I like music used in a scene. This was the first time watching this was the first time that young boy ever heard Inagata-Davida, which now I can tell you all these many years later, and it's probably because of that moment, it's one of my favorite songs of all time. I actually had somebody, we had one of these icebreaker things at a conference, and somebody was like, "Oh, it's like, what song would you listen to if you could only listen to one song for the rest of the time?" And I went, "Oh, Inagata-Davida." And they were like, "Oh, stop it. You're just saying that because it's a long song." I'm like, "No, I listen to it regularly. I love that song."
Home Improvement was the first time I heard it, so it had a little bit of a different
effect. Makes me think of the Simpsons episode.
Oh, well, yes, that's one of the best jokes in history. But as much as I love it, I fully recognize the shortcomings, and the director's cut, which is what I've watched and what I am rating here, is a 4, and it will never be more than a 4. And it is a 4 because I do find enough in this that is interesting. And I do like the tableau, and I do agree. Dollarhide doesn't get quite the screen time he should. Lecter is not the big over-the-top guy. I find him a little bit more real-worldy, but I like the fact that it's Will Graham's movie. It's about him. And so I like that. I like the focus on the character. I like the fact that nobody is allowed to eclipse him in terms of character importance. It's him. And that's why you're watching the movie. So for me, that's a success. And I enjoy it. So 4 stars from me.
It's fun though, because as you're describing it, it sounds like this movie is your barometer movie. Like you know it so well, and what you like about it, like that you could almost hold up anything to this in different aspects and see where it flows. Not in a better or worse way, but just in it's giving you an anchor.
It just wound up coming along at the right time and helping crystallize those sorts of things for me. So a great way to put it. But we're closing the wing of Lecter, unless we suddenly decide to suffer head trauma and watch Hannibal Rising, which hopefully we won't. And we're going to be walking out of the wing of Lecter and back into the House of Demi next week with 1993's career-changing performance for Tom Hanks in Philadelphia.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.